You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health Podcast. I have Kirsten Shockey. She's the co-author of a book about fermentation, which we'll get into, but her and Christopher Shockey, they're co-authors of the book's called Fiery Ferments, best-selling fermented vegetables, and forthcoming miso, tempeh, natto, and other tasty ferments, a step-by-step guide to fermenting grains and beans for umami and health. So, sounds interesting. Kirsten, thanks for coming.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so how did you find out about the world of fermentation? What got you into it?
It's kind of a organic story, I guess. We moved to our homestead 20 years ago, and just really wanted our children to be in touch with where their food came from. And so, we got animals and had big gardens and of course,
cool.
Making all that food. Yeah, it was cool. Making all that food, you suddenly realize, oh no, I have to figure out how to preserve this food, right? And so at first it was, the first fermentations really that I started doing on the farm were things like cheese, because we had dairy animals, and my husband, we had a lot of apple trees, and so he started doing cider. But vegetables were still, either frozen, dried, or canned. And in about 1999, my mom actually gave us a crock full of fermenting cabbage, sauerkraut. And, it was kind of in their early understanding how these things are. She was a Chinese herbalist and acupuncturist. And so she was starting to understand how these fermented foods are important in our diet. And so we started doing that, and that grew into believe it or not, a farmstead little sauerkraut company, and that was going really well, except we realized that so many people wanted to understand this book, so we had this food, so we had the idea to write the first book, the fermented vegetables book, just to kind of help people understand what kind of was lost over the last 100 years.
Yeah, I've been curious about fermented foods too, but I'm sure like a lot of people, you worry, how do you know if it's right or if it's not spoiled and it won't kill you? And, how do you know how to do it? And will it taste okay? And what kind of concerns have you heard from people, or what kind of things have you gone through?
Well, exactly that. We haven't grown up with these foods. We've grown up with germ theory and do not leave things out of the refrigerator. So there's nothing intuitive in our current culture that says, yeah, we'll leave this on the counter for a week and then stick our fork in it and put it in our mouth, right? And so those are exactly the concerns. I don't want to kill my family. And I'll have lots of people, they come to me and they say, it seems fine. I think it's fine. I made it. I put it in my fridge, but I haven't been brave enough to taste it yet. But the cool thing is, especially like with vegetables, if it's fermented properly, you're going to know. If it's fermented improperly, you're going to know. There's no death by fermentation. Nobody's died from fermented vegetables or, any of these ferments. Actually, when they go south, it's really obvious. Unlike, canned green beans, which are famous for botulism, where it's hidden, tasteless, odorless. That doesn't happen with fermentation. So when it goes south, like all your five senses say, do not put me in your mouth.
It's obvious that it's horrible. Huh.
Yeah, like the texture will be very wrong, and the smell will be not just funky. I mean, funky is one thing, but it'll be like compost or rotten potatoes or, something that's like, oh no, that's foul. And so,
So what are some of the most common ferments that people can make?
well, the most common, easiest one is in that sauerkraut or kimchi range, where you're just, mixing your vegetables with some salt, and you're creating a brine, and you're keeping it, in a jar in an anaerobic condition for, 5 days, 7 days, 2 weeks. Just, it all depends on the temperature and how sour you want it. But then it's done. Like you're ready to go. So that's probably one of the most common. People that don't like those kind of vegetables really like the hot sauces, and it's just as easy to ferment some peppers up and have a sauce, in 2 to 3 weeks.
What else do you find that holds people back? Is it, are some people just not patient enough, or do they, again, they second guess themselves? Like, what happens to stop people from doing this kind of stuff?
I think you hit it on the nose both times. Fear, not understanding it. And then the second part is second guessing if I can do this. Sometimes all it takes is just seeing somebody else set up a jar and be like, oh, it's really not tricky. And then I think also just anytime stepping into something new, you think it's going to take a lot of time. And, the truth is most of these ferments are super quick, and you've made it, and you don't eat a whole lot at a time. And so now you've got this convenience food. I've got lots of ferments in my fridge. And so when I'm not wanting to cook or, don't have a lot on hand, it's like I throw those and some of the things that are in my fridge, in a wrap, and I, suddenly have this nutrient dense, really bright tasting thing to eat. And so I think it's that combination of not trusting themselves and a little bit of time. But once people are into it, then it's game on.
When you do a lot of these ferments, can you cook them and eat them and still get all the benefits, or does cooking destroy the beneficial bacteria? Or is fermenting just a way to put food on pause for a while so you could have it later?
So yeah, there's a lot going on. So let me talk real quick about what is going on. So what happens is, the microbes are transforming the food. We'll just use vegetables because we've been talking about those. They'll get in there and they start consuming the starches, the carbohydrates, sugar, and all of that. And as they do that, they're sort of pre-digesting it for you. And so they're eating those sugars and changing those sugars that maybe we can't digest anyway into something that is readily available for us. As they do that, it's creating that enzymes and the acid. And so when you eat that fermented food, you're now getting these foods that the vitamins are more available to you. You're able to uptake them more readily than, say, a raw carrot versus a fermented carrot. And you're also, some of those sugars are being processed out of there. So you're getting more that way too. Vitamin C goes up. Vitamin B12 is now on board. K2. So there's a lot happening, and you're getting, like I said, this acidity and the enzymes. And those enzymes are helping you digest not only that food that you're eating, but whatever that meal is that you're having with the food. So then there's the probiotics, and that's the part that would, get killed by cooking. So anything under 105 degrees, you're going to get the live probiotics. You get up over that to about 135 degrees, you're still going to get the enzymes, digestive enzymes helping you out there. And above that, you're getting a nice warm meal, and you're also getting the added nutritional benefits of it being pre-broken down and those vitamins and all of that. So it's kind of a complicated answer, but anyhow you choose to eat these foods, you're going to still get some benefits versus just, the raw vegetable. The other thing, and this is back to the safety.
It's a really good. It's a really good way to explain it, by the way. So keep going.
Oh, good.
You were saying safety. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So getting back to the safety, the other thing that's really interesting is as that acid happens, right? So these ferments, not only are they not, they're very safe and not dangerous, but in places where, third world areas where they can't eat raw vegetables because of the bad microbes that could be on them, they can eat those vegetables raw when they're fermented, because the acidity that develops with the lactic acid doing its thing kind of pushes out and kills all the bad microbes. So it's kind of cool that way too. So it actually can be more healthy for places where you can't get clean food.
Have you observed people fermenting using organic vegetables versus not? And is there a difference that you can tell?
For the most part, I have never seen any huge problems with non-organic vegetables. Most people try to use organic. I try to use organic, but I've also, some places they're just not available, and I've done krauts that have been, and other ferments that have been fine with non-organic vegetables. Some things get irradiated, when they're like, if they're imported, and I've seen that to be, that's the place that I've seen sort of a problem, because then all the microbes have been killed off, when it goes through that machine. And then
a lot
also
of these ferments, do you have to use a starter culture, or can you just naturally have it ferment in the ambient?
Yeah, everything you need is on the vegetables. All those microbes are there and ready to go. As long as you don't want to wash your vegetables with antibiotic soap or anything like that. They're all there. They're ready to go to work for you. So you don't need a starter culture at all. You need, like I said, a little salt and a little thyme.
Well, what if you compare, doing, kimchi with a starter versus not, or anything else you ferment? Like, do you have any, are you proud of any of the microbes you had for 30 years that you keep reusing? Like boudin bread baking in San Francisco, they have
right.
the same yeast from 100 years ago. Do you have any of that?
Right. With the vegetable ferments, we don't. With some of our other ferments, either the dairy ferments, like the kefir, and we of course do sourdough, and we do that. But with the vegetable ferments, there really isn't much of a point. And you mentioned kimchi. It's interesting. In Korea, of course, it's a really important staple in their diet. And as it's becoming more industrialized, as people aren't making their year's supply of kimchi at home anymore, they're buying it. And so I've done a lot of studies. And one of the studies I read a number of years ago said that not only could they not speed up the process really with adding a starter culture, because, companies were trying to make kimchi faster, but still have it be fermented. They didn't speed up the process. And in some cases, they found that the microbes on the vegetables were actually interrupted by the starter culture. And so it kind of, they had to duke it out, if you will, to kind of get themselves going, because there was just so much going on, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that is. Huh. Have you tried it? Have you tried to do starters on stuff normally that doesn't have starters? And was it a non-starter when you did? Yeah, Joe.
Well, it doesn't, they work. What's interesting to me is there's a whole host of bacteria that are in the lactobacillus family, and they kind of have this succession, right? The first one that moves in, the first one that wakes up, I guess, they're all there on the vegetable, but the first one that wakes up is, its whole job is to start getting that acidity level down. And it can live in that, higher acidity environment that you're starting out with. And as it does its thing, and that's when you're going to see that really active fermentation. As soon as it gets to a certain point in the acidity, the pH goes down, it dies off because it's made its own environment too acidic. But as soon as it does, it kind of wakes up the next species. And this kind of goes on over and over again. And why I'm explaining this is I've, seen some starter cultures out there on the market that are L. plantarum, which is a really good microbe for us, a probiotic. But the thing with L. plantarum is if you put it in your in your sauerkraut, it's not going to get started until the native microbes, wild ones that came with it, have already gotten it down to a lower ratio. So yeah, I've used starter cultures, but I haven't noticed any any reason to. It's just for me, it's something that I need to make sure I had on hand, and it's more cost, and it takes away from just, oh, I'm at the market, I see this vegetable that looks beautiful, I'm going to go home and ferment it, because most of these starter cultures you'd have to mail order or whatever.
Okay, interesting. So in the world of fermenting, like what should a novice attempt and not attempt, and how about more advanced people?
Well, I think in the world of vegetables, I think a novice can really go for what they'd like to go for. Carrots are a really successful ferment. Sauerkraut, kimchi, like I said, hot sauce. So in the world of vegetables, I think it's pretty wide open to get started and feel confident in that everything or everything you need you have in your house, salt in a jar. And the ones that are starting to get a little more complicated would be the things that are in that new book that's coming out, miso, tempeh, natto, and other ferments, because it's the grains and the beans. And now you're starting to deal with different microbes, not just lactobacillus. And whereas the vegetables, they're happy on the counter, but some of these other ones, you've got to start thinking about incubation and keeping things at more narrow temperatures.
What about making like your own yogurt?
Yogurt. Yogurt's pretty easy. This one you also have, incubation temperatures to deal with, but that can be done. A lot of times people are able to do that by wrapping, their cultured milk in, the jars in the towels, and then putting them in the oven with, like the light on, and that keeps it that nice temperature for the yogurt to happen. So and yogurt, of course, it's a lactic ferment as well, but you do need to start it with a culture.
Yeah, it's weird. I have like this idea that in the store you can get yogurts, but they don't. They may have supposedly a few billion bacteria, but I wonder if like you can make a yogurt with trillions of bacteria and get like a super probiotic out of it if you make a good one.
There's so many wonderful different cultures that do have very different things than maybe what they're using industrially. So you can, get a lot of diversity that way. As far as, specific numbers, it's kind of an interesting thing, because the live bacteria are alive as long as there's food, right, for them to eat and keep them alive. And so depending on, if you get that yogurt when it's really young and fresh and those bacteria are really stable, you're going to have way more. But as that yogurt, continues to ferment or whatever, those bacteria can die off. Luckily, what happens when we put our ferments, yogurt, or vegetables or whatever in the fridge, we put them to sleep basically and sort of put them into a stasis. And that's why when you buy these things, they are still live.
Well, I was wondering, what if you were able to, ferment and make dry out some of the ferment and make like a powder that was stable for a little while. And then when you go out to eat, you take it and you sprinkle it on your food. So you could, if you eat out, you could essentially like improve your food with a whole bunch of bacteria on it that are beneficial before you eat it.
Absolutely. We've been playing around a lot with that because we're backpackers, and the weight of them dry versus ferment is also a big difference. And so what you can do is, as long as you're dehydrating them, I like to do it at like 100 degrees. Because you don't want it going over that 103, 105 mark where they'll die. And we'll make powders out of kimchi or whatever, and then we'll have like this kind of salty, tasty seasoning that also has a probiotic quality to it.
Yeah, I just think it's something that you can travel with that would help heal your gut when you eat at places where the food's crappy.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, I just envision that'd be a really cool product that you guys could make and sell. Just an idea.
Right. Well, we're actually working on. It's funny you mentioned that, because we are working on that whole idea of that, because we've been traveling so much ourselves, and we can't always take our normal ferments with us. So we are working on, okay, like how can we make this into something that people would be interested in?
Have you ever have you experimented where let's say you've been sick or something happened with you, and you try to somehow like medicate yourself or heal yourself with your ferments? Have you gotten into that part of the realm?
Definitely when, my stomach is a little off. I feel so much better if I have a little sauerkraut juice or something like that. What I have noticed is I feel like in the last, especially, maybe 8 to 5 years, 10 years or so, since these have been so much more part of our lives, that we were talking about it the other day. I haven't gotten, a real, and this is just me, but, an intestinal flu kind of thing. I've gotten more the other kind of flu, but not that intestinal flu where things are just wanting to purge. And I don't know if there's any relationship but I do know that, we have something fermented at least once a day.
Yeah, I wonder, like, if you get sick or someone and they have to take antibiotics, you can give them a little, bit of your special powder or ferment to help balance the gut-killing effects of antibiotics.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And my husband had to take antibiotics when we were on a trip in Chile, and we definitely hit him with everything. And he's doing pretty good now, or he's doing just fine now. He was,
good.
I think it helped him kind of get through that.
So you have your book, but are you selling ferments commercially?
Jars
of this,
we don't.
Bags of that?
Nope, we don't do that at all anymore. We sell books and we sell, the knowledge. We go teach places and are hoping to get some online things going that way at some point. But at this point, it's all about empowering folks to, make their own probiotics.
Have you thought about doing like an online course, a series of videos on how to, make this, that, or the other? Because that would be pretty
Totally.
scalable,
Yeah, no, and we totally want to do that. We've actually recorded a few things, but and want to make, kind of a little bit of a curriculum to go with it, not just a video, but actually some more substance. So people really, what I want people to feel like they really can go into the kitchen and do it, And so we've been working on that, just so many hours in a day,
Yeah. Have you tried to ferment anything strange that you've never heard has been fermented before? Have you ever tried that?
What was I from? Gosh, yes, I have, and it's like blanking on me right now on what I was doing. This fairly recently too.
Can you ferment coffee that you would drink? Or?
People do make kombucha out of coffee. We have a cider book that's coming out next year, and I guess I don't know that nobody's ever done this before, but I had a lot of fun capturing wild yeast and of blossoms and seeing how those interacted with the apple juice to flavor the cider. So instead of buying commercial yeast or even using just the wild yeast on the apples themselves, we were using pasteurized juice and having the cider ferment from the yeast of different botanicals and blossoms.
Well, very cool. So where are you currently doing your classes? I mean, it sounds like the best resource for people is to get, one or more of your books, probably on Amazon or at your website. But, can people meet you in person or take a class, or what's another way to interact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got on our website, we've got our calendar that we're actually adding to daily right now because our pretty much August through mid-November, we're going to be on the road teaching all across the country. So we might be near different people, and our website we do have a.
Are you posting your tour dates and all that on your website?
Yeah, it's on the calendar on our website. And we've also got a free e-course for folks if they want to sign up for it. It's 7 days, or 5 ferments in 7 days. So it really walks new people, beginners, through fermentation. And then, like you said, there's the books and someday there'll be some e-courses out there that are video style.
Well, very cool. Well, it was super interesting, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and Have you ever fermented anything?
My wife, she makes injera, so it's like this. You use teff, and
I love injera.
This really small flour. Yeah, she makes it. She watched like some videos of real Ethiopian women making it, and she made it. And you should ferment it.
Awesome.
And, the eyes of the injera open, and it's pretty cool. We cook it then and eat it. We don't eat it raw and stuff, but that's the one thing that she ferments. She tried a kombucha once with a SCOBY. She looked at it. She's like, I don't know about this. And so I gave it to the dogs, and she was horrified, but they liked it. They ate it. So.
Yeah, some people make dog treats out of their SCOBYs on purpose, so the dogs are into it. Lots of probiotics. But yeah, injera is wonderful. It in that fermentation, it breaks. Even though you're cooking it, it's not probiotic. You're still breaking down the grains to make them way more nutritious for you. So that's cool.
You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.